Good evening and welcome to After Service, a production of Open Door Community Church, featuring your pastor, Brian Ricketts, and me, Joe.
Our amazing worship director, pastor.
I mean, you can put any label you want on it, but at the end of the day, it's just me.
And just me.
It's interesting, just as we're getting started, this is the banter time of the podcast, but the way we perceive ourselves is sometimes, like looking at a funhouse mirror, it's so skewed because we can't be objective about it. And good and bad.
Good and bad.
And I had that both this week. As you're aware, my tendency is to lean into humor and sometimes at the expense of other people. And occasionally that needs to be pulled back. And I remember a friend of mine many years ago who said that my effectiveness at what I do would be vastly improved if I gave myself more credit and used humor less. And so there's that. And then I commented on a post for a woman who I've worked with in the past in my kind of Christian ministry with podcasting and stuff. And she shared, I thought, which was really a lovely story. And I just commented, thank you for sharing that. It was really touching. In fact, the way she shared it brought tears to my eyes.
Aww.
And her response was, you don't know how much that means to me. You're like a father figure in this and a leader in this community. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Which, first of all, I go, wait, why am I that old? Okay, I guess so. That was the first thing is I'm like, and I think of her as a peer and not me in any kind of elevated status or anything like that. So I just, it's really interesting, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking tonight, I don't think, but how we can really get ourselves fixated on who we are without ever really touching base with people around us who know us well, who can provide some objective feedback, and it's wonderful to have people in your life that you trust that will speak into you and do so in a loving way. The best friends that you have are not the ones that affirm everything you do, but the ones who say, you're kind of screwing up right now, or you don't know how good you are, stop. They just provide that perspective. And thank you for letting me share that. It was something it's been an interesting dichotomy for me this week as I've kind of ruminated on how I interact with people. So
I think you're 100% right in all of it, both in a general sense. We don't see each other. We don't see ourselves accurately, both positive and negative. We're blind to our faults. And we don't often see our good qualities. And especially, I don't think we see how much of an impact we make on the people around us, both positive and negative, but also I want to affirm that absolutely you are a huge impact in my life. You're a huge impact positively in a lot of people's lives. And I don't know that you always see it. So.
Well, and it goes both ways when you are somebody that, whether you know it or not, is impacting people. That means that there's an additional level of accountability in how you conduct yourself.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I do a good job of that in some venues, like online. I am so deliberate about that, but in person, there's not necessarily the benefit of a 5-second rule or anything like where you can kind of rewind or something. And
and for most people, that's the opposite. They'll say stuff online that they would never say in person. And you're kind of the opposite, which is interesting. I think I am too, though. I often will say something that I realize afterwards, I go, what? Or have a response that I wish I had taken time to think about and measured, because I can, as you know, I can react emotionally like that. And that is not always a very good thing.
No, No.
No.
Yeah, and at the same time, yeah, the way I view like the in online interaction, it's permanent,
Yeah,
and I
it
think
is.
that's something that a lot of people forget is that your impulsive response to something in real life, in some way, yeah, yes, you should be measured, you should be thoughtful, you should take a beat before you respond. You might even take days before you respond. And somehow there's that our response online that feels justified or whatever. We forget that, and I talk to my kids about this, and I talk to other people in my life about this, is that what you choose to share, I could find 10 years from now, and
Yeah,
that reflects on you. And to me, that's always been something I've been aware of,
yeah,
and I'm really grateful that I've had the presence of mind somehow with my ADHD brain and my impulsivity and those things that
yeah.
I haven't left a trail.
Embarrassing things and uggs
Yeah.
online. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, I mean, that's 8 minutes of our time. So forgive me, folks. And by the way, if you're leaving comments, forgive us. I didn't get logged in correctly. Um, so I'm not
I'll
certain
see if
that,
I can find it.
yeah. Oh,
So,
you know what? I think I may have figured out why. Give me a second. Let me see if I can do this.
Foundations of Hope. Oh, look at this. Yes, yes, yes. We have two comments.
Oh,
Yes. Going, uh-huh. Yep.
fair
Yeah.
enough.
So yeah, let's see. Foundations of Hope. While you're doing that, I can give a little speech on that. Foundations of Hope is what we talked about on Sunday. I'm going to do a 3-part series on hope, and there's this week it's all about our hope is founded on the character of God. Because if God isn't who God is, then there's no way we're going to have hope. Um, they were one that God is great, that he's big, he's huge, he's powerful, he's bigger than all of our problems. It answers the question, can God do something? Is he actually capable of doing something? The next one is kind of a two-parter. One is that he is good and that he is wise. And that was one of my things that I took away this week, was realizing that though you really shouldn't separate wisdom and goodness. And we can talk about that. But it answers the question, what is his intentions? And he's good and he knows what he's doing. And that's one of the big questions we struggle with. Does God know what he's doing? Yeah, he does. He's wise. And then the last one is his loyal love. It hits the word has said, and it's like, well, is he going to be good to me even though I'm a sinner, even though I'm messed up? And the answer is yes, because of Jesus. So there's the elevator speech.
It reminds me of the marshmallow game or marshmallow test a little bit. So for those people who aren't aware, the marshmallow test, I think, I can't remember when it was, late 60s, early 70s, maybe. But you're familiar with it.
I think so.
Basically, they would put a child in a room and say, with a
Right. Yes.
marshmallow, and say, I'm going to leave the room for 2 minutes. You can eat that marshmallow now, or if you choose to wait, you can have 3 marshmallows when I come back. But they weren't really aware of how long the guy was going to be gone or anything. And they found that the children who were able to wait, to not go for the instant gratification or whatever, who saw the long game, basically, oh, I can get more if I just show some discipline here, actually were more successful in life. And that makes me think of like how necessary it is sometimes to play the long game when it comes to our perspective in life's
Mm-hmm.
circumstance, that it could get really easy to be weighed down with the tough stuff that's going on and not look at it from, well,
Mm.
let's not think about, and actually just before we started today, you asked how I was doing, and I mentioned that, my perspective from a subjective vantage is, I don't think I worked hard enough. I don't think I put enough effort in. But if I take a moment and try to think more objectively, well, I got this done and I accomplished this and I progressed
Mm-hmm.
here. And if I look over what I've done over the past several weeks or months or years or whatever, like, oh, no, I've been, yeah. Uh, and I think it's the same with God, is to say, listen, don't get hung up on the valley right here. Yeah, it's hard. We can't, don't ignore the fact that it's hard, but also that he's good. Coming back to the idea of he is good. He knows what's happening. Our limited perspective doesn't allow us to see how the valley today leads to the mountaintop tomorrow or
Right.
at some point. And it's really hard to do. I don't want to say that that's particularly easy. But that's the whole Footprints poem, looking back, you go, oh,
Yes. Yes, the Footprints one. I want to talk even, we can keep talking about it, but that's kind of what we're going to mostly focus on next week, this coming Sunday, is where we're headed and seeing that as a destination. And I don't think I did a good job with that, but this week of talking about, but the Footprints perfect is I wanted you to think about right now, having God with you in the moments. What does that mean for having hope? And it's like, who is this person who's carrying you, who's your companion in this life? And those are the characteristics. I don't think I communicated that well, and so this is why I love talking with you. You brought that out, that I didn't communicate that well, but that's what I was thinking about. It's the Footprints. If you guys don't know what the Footprints is, you should look it up. So,
yeah, it's one of those poems that you see it printed on posters and on things around all over the place, especially if you go to the beach.
yeah.
But it's very hard. And I'll say that, like, when you're drowning, it's really hard to consider that you shouldn't panic, and that you know how to swim, that kind of thing.
That the person who's with you knows how to swim and is going to keep you above the waves.
Right.
He's able to swim, that he knows what he's doing and where to go. He's not disoriented. The waves aren't going to overcome him. And he actually wants to rescue you, not drown you. Yeah. And that sounds crazy that you would think that way, but people really do struggle. Is God just trying to drown me? Is that really what he's up to? And it's not the case.
Well, yeah. It's the question that comes up a lot of times for people who are either struggling with their faith or are opposed to Christianity, or, is that if he was really good, then why does this happen? And why does that happen? And these are fair questions.
They are.
I'm not dismissive of them, because they're usually coming out of pain,
right?
Hurt. So
trauma.
Yeah, that was exactly the word I was going to say, but I say that word so much that I don't want it.
No, but I think about seeing a lot of people who come back from war, some turn away from God because of the trauma of war.
Right.
Or it's maybe its own personal trauma, whether it's abuse or rape or the death of a loved one. And it's like, oh, yeah. So why did God allow that to happen?
Yeah. And sometimes it's generational. Gosh, it's really hard. That's just, I think I refer to this advanced Christianity.
Yeah.
When, as you mature in your faith, and I'm not saying that I'm mature in my faith, I want to be very clear, there's so much room to grow, but that, somebody like, let's say, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, somebody like that whose experience and suffering and stuff was all about understanding the ultimate goal. Paul, where am I ultimately going? I can suffer this earthly pain circumstance because I'm so confident in what the promise is for me. Now that's really advanced stuff from my perspective. I am not there.
Right. But we can get the analogy. It's like suffering the pain of the vaccine, whether it's for measles or COVID or whatever it is, that's painful. And you could say in the moment, how is this worth it? This pain worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you just don't have the perspective. The people who say this pain isn't worth it. But wait a minute. Do you really want measles? No. So the pain is worth it. But the child can't get that.
Yeah.
And I'm not calling us children, but in a sense, yeah, I am. But we all are compared to him.
Right. And that's wonderful. I mean, we've talked about that before, but we so often compare ourselves to other people around us. And the purpose of that is to elevate ourselves or to make us feel more comfortable about our position. But once you put Jesus in the mix, there's not a comparison. We're all way down here.
Mm-hmm.
And compared to where Christ is, we these are minutia,
Minutia. Yeah.
And so don't get hung up on that stuff. But that was only like the God is good. But the other points, the Hesed, can you go into that a bit more? Because I think that's the word, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hesed. It's a word that's helpful for you to know. I mean, you don't need to know, but it's a good word to know in the Bible. It is the Old Testament word, the Hebrew word that is translated in a lot of different ways, and it's very frequent in the Old Testament. It's a word that captures a cluster of attributes of God. It's translated as loving kindness and faithfulness and mercy and loyal love. It's this quality of God that will do good to you and be faithful to keep doing good to you, will stick with you and bless you in spite of you blowing it. That he'll forgive you.
It's
and stay with you.
interesting how we translate words, especially like the word love, for example, that we have one word and Greek has 3, right? And in that, is there 3 or is there 5?
There might be 4.
Agape, filial, and
Eros.
Eros, yeah, romantic.
It's only 3?
I think it's only 3.
It's late.
Yeah.
Okay. Either way, the point is multiple.
Right, and that sometimes it's easier to understand the translation of the nuanced word.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are reading the Bible, sometimes I think that we forget that we're reading a translation and it wasn't written in English, so that if it's presented in a certain way, they're trying to project the actual meaning of that word. That's where if you have the time, I mean, there's plenty of resources online to do a language study on Scripture and pull up what that means. It exposes really some really rich things. And like the word loving kindness, we don't use that word.
We don't use that word.
I mean, even the word loving kindness, which is translated, which is English, it doesn't have to be translated, but it's not something we use every day. But there's something there that says, to me, it says, I love you so much that everything that I do is going to benefit you, maybe not immediately, but ultimately. And,
in my wisdom.
Yeah. And if you believe that he is wise, if you believe that he knows so much more than you, not just not just intelligence, that he knows everything, but also, what's your heart? And to me, it's not, I wouldn't say it's heavy, but it's a relief.
Yeah.
To be able to say, I don't get it. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm here. It doesn't make any sense to me. And yet I trust you. You are good. You love me and you're wise. And I am not good. I'm not wise compared to you. And I don't love nearly as much as you do. So okay, it's hard. You got it. I'll do my best under the circumstances.
And there, it's not that you're being blind to your faith, but you do have to come to moments where you just simply say, I don't see it, but I believe it.
Right. Yeah. It's a leap of faith to some extent.
And we get that way in relationships too. It's like, because of these other things, because I've known what you've done in the past, even though I don't see how you're being good to me right now, I'm going to trust that you are good. It's the wife that'll trust the husband to be in a place that's not necessarily, that's a little dangerous in terms of like committing adultery. But I know him. I trust him. I will let him do this because I know his character.
Well, even in smaller ways, that if you from a covenant relationship perspective, start from the assumption, we've talked about this before, that the other person loves you and has your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
That you spend less time considering how this person is trying to hurt you and more time trying to understand, I wonder what is motivating them to act in this way if I recognize that they wouldn't do something specifically to hurt me. And sometimes that's how I feel about what's happening in my circumstance where God is involved, is like, I don't understand this. I know he ultimately has my good in mind. I may not understand in this life why he's doing these things, but often I'm able, like footprints, to reflect and go, oh my gracious. Vanessa is a great example of that with her journey in her second career or third career, depending on how you're counting. There's no way we would have mapped it out for her to be where she is right now. And
that's just one that you can see.
That's right. Yeah.
But what are the other ones you can't see?
Yeah. All over the place.
Over the place.
The ripples that we can't see in the water that are impacting other people, which kind of brings us back to what we talked about at the beginning, how we influence people and we don't know how we do.
Right.
And
I want to encourage people, if you're struggling with this, and all of us too, those of even if you're not, is to go back to the resurrection and the cross. Because, that's, I said it's not a leap of faith. It's not blind, because your faith is based on your intellectual understanding and thinking that it actually did occur. And if it did actually occur, well, then so many other pieces fall into place. Well, then the Old Testament is true, that who God is, that Jesus said, everything Jesus said is true. On it, that we know for sure that he has my best interest in heart because he did that. So I don't know what he's doing, but that demonstrated his love for me. Okay. So I know that's true, even if I don't get it. So it all just stand on the resurrection. Stand on the resurrection.
There's a foundation there that if you're sitting on the right foundation, the other things are much easier, simpler to process, maybe.
Right.
I'm trying to find the right word. But when you start from the right foundation, it's like, okay, if this is true, then I'm okay.
So what do I talk about in the next 2 weeks, since we've kind of covered everything?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. We have to assume that not everybody who's watching the service is watching the podcast.
That's true.
And that there is space to explore and maybe discover things that we hadn't discussed here.
This is my problem to deal with.
Yeah. Well, and if I'm gonna teach next month, which has me a little anxious, I just as soon life be difficult for you between here and there, so that I look better.
Sure. Okay. Oh, I love it, Joe. Okay. Well, that's all that is this week. I'm planning on talking about our destination, which is Eden Part 2, or Eden Plus, maybe something along those lines.
2.0.
2.0, Eden better, even but
Oh,
better.
wait, did you just say Eden better? Like even better, but Eden better?
Yeah, that's a pun.
That is.
Eden, but only better.
Right. All right.
Eden on steroids.
It's one of those nights, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm punch drunk.
Okay. All right, folks. Well, thanks for hanging with us this evening. Appreciate the time. I'm going to go make some pizza. And I'm not sure what you're going to do, Brian, but
burgers.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, folks, have a great night. We will see you Sunday morning or whenever you catch the service. And we're grateful that you joined us tonight.
Have a good night.
Take care.